My wife introduced me as her good friend at her promotion party. I never imagined I would walk into my wife's promotion party feeling invisible. The atmosphere was thick with congratulations and warm chatter, the soft glow of fairy lights above creating a sense of intimacy. I'd arrived early, carrying a small gift bag with sparkling wine, wearing a crisp shirt and a hopeful smile. This was meant to be a celebration of her achievements, her first promotion in nearly 5 years of dedication at her firm. I wanted to shine just as brightly beside her. As guests streamed in, I watched them gravitate toward my wife. She has that effect. Colleagues, distant cousins, childhood friends, even her mentor from university, everyone seemed to know her story, and they greeted her with genuine excitement. I stayed back, greeting people with polite smiles and nods. I heard snippets of confetti-like laughter behind me, but I couldn't zero in on them. The vantage point felt distant, as though I was spectating rather than participating. Finally, after what felt like an age of hovering awkwardly at the edges of the crowded room, my wife found me. She squeezed my arm and said, "You okay?" I nodded, though I felt that glimmer of unease struggle to bloom into something more. Swallowing, I managed to grin and said, "Yeah, just taking it all in. It's amazing how many people are here for you." And it was true, she had earned every kind word and supportive hug. Moments later, the host tapped on a glass. The room hushed. My wife's face lit up with pride. The applause that followed enveloped her, roaring like a wave. I applauded, too, though it felt strangely distant. Hearing her name announced, I half expected my chest to swell with pride, but instead, I felt the familiar tightening, that tiny knot of inadequacy that's whispered lies in my ear. "You're not really part of this celebration." Then she spoke. Not the host, but my wife. She did something I never saw coming. With the microphone in her hand and the crowd leaning in, eager, she looked me right in the eye, smiled, and said, "I'd like to introduce my good friend, James." She gestured toward me. The light seemed to flash in that instant. Sections of the room blinked as heads turned, curious. My heart pounded at a frenetic pace. Yes, that night she called me friend, despite us being married for 8 years. A wave of thoughts slammed me. Why, does she not want others to know? Is she embarrassed? A heat rushed to my face, not from embarrassment alone but from that raw sting of exclusion. I felt a tremor in my hands as I reached out to accept the microphone she passed me. I heard someone whisper, "Oh, her friend." Somewhere down the line, a chuckle. My pulse pounded louder than the subdued music in my ears. The microphone was warm, its metal slick against my palm. The camera flashes flickered, capturing this moment, my moment, declaring to the world that I was merely a friend. My chest constricted. My mind scattered, caught between anger and hurt, but I knew I had to speak. So I breathed deep, swallowed the ache, and said, "Thank you, Sarah, for introducing me. I'm honored to be here." The applause followed, but it felt muted, as if filtered through glass. I offered a brief smile, feeling its weight on my face. My mind raced, desperately searching for words, something heartfelt to connect with the crowd, to support her. I settled on something simple: "I'm incredibly proud of you." My voice cracked and I paused. I looked around. Faces mirrored my sentiment, warm smiles, nods. Someone had handed me a glass, and I raised it. "To Sarah," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "Congratulations on a promotion long deserved." I looked at her again. She stood there, eyes bright. She grinned. But she didn't say husband, and that mattered more than I'd let myself admit. The drink in my hand trembled. I forced it to remain steady. Lifting the glass higher, I nodded and mouthed, "Well done." Her grin deepened and she winked. Relief washed in, yet the sting persisted. Someone else would leave that party thinking I was just a friend. The crowd clapped again, celebratory, warm. As I stepped aside, Sarah drifted back into conversation circles, work buddies, old classmates, mentors. I followed, half hoping someone would hear that I was her husband. A colleague approached, shook my hand and said, "Congratulations to both of you." I managed to smile and replied, "Thank you," but I couldn't help thinking how differently that might have sounded if Sarah had said my husband instead of my good friend. That first hour was a dizzy blur, champagne corks popped, toasts made, laughter swirling. I floated within the crowd like a specter. Many guests came up to speak with Sarah, exchanging pulses of warmth. They nodded at me occasionally, and I returned the nods, but the unspoken label hovered above me: friend, not partner. It echoed in my mind. I wondered if the night would change for me, moment by moment. Maybe someone would ask about me, my own career. Maybe someone would anchor me in the narrative. But no such moment came. Instead, by the end of the hour, I felt like a prop someone needed for the toast, needed for appearances, not for personal identity. And yet, as I watched Sarah beam with pride, I forced myself to let go of the gnawing insecurity. After all, this was her night. She deserved the spotlight. Me? I'd be the silent backbone in the frame, supporting her, even if unannounced. The night didn't end with that one introduction. No, it unfolded like a long, tangled ribbon, beautiful on the surface but hiding knots along the way. I kept to the edges, near the drink table, swirling ice in my glass more than sipping from it. The party had moved into a warmer rhythm. People had loosened up, conversations flowed freely, and laughter rippled across the room in waves. Sarah was in her element. She always thrived in rooms like this, half-celebration, half-networking jungle. She bounced from person to person, never once needing to look over her shoulder to see if I was following. I watched her gesture animatedly while talking to a tall man in a slim blue suit. He laughed too loudly, leaned in too closely. She laughed with him. I looked down into my drink, telling myself not to read into it. I moved through the party like a ghost, smiling politely, answering a few shallow questions, mostly about where I'd met Sarah or what I thought of her big promotion. Not once did anyone say, "So you're her husband?" They didn't know. They had no way of knowing. That moment on stage had cemented a narrative. I was a friend, maybe an old one, maybe someone she leaned on in rough patches, but not the person she shared her life with, not the one who stayed up with her proofreading reports, or listening to her vent after long meetings. Not the one who cleaned the house so she wouldn't have to after pulling 2 consecutive all-nighters. I found myself talking to an older woman, one of Sarah's managers, I think. She had a soft voice and tired eyes. She smiled gently and said, "You've been very supportive of Sarah. She told me how much you've encouraged her through the last year." That caught me off guard. She did? She nodded, sipping her wine. Yes. She said she couldn't have made it here without her friend James. You must be very close. Friend. Again. I nodded stiffly, unsure what to say. My smile stretched thin. Later in the evening, I stepped outside to catch some air. The patio was dimly lit, a few smokers lingering by the edge. I sat on a bench, letting the cool breeze calm my nerves. The muffled sounds of the party still reached me: music, chatter, a cheer going up as someone arrived late. I must have been out there 10 minutes before Sarah appeared, holding 2 glasses of wine. She sat next to me without a word, handed me one, and bumped her shoulder lightly against mine. "Tired?" she asked. I shrugged. "Just needed a minute." She sipped her wine, watching the darkness beyond the edge of the fence. "You've been quiet tonight." I nodded. "Yeah." There was a pause. The kind of pause you don't fill unless you have to. "I saw how you introduced me," I said finally. "Your good friend." She glanced at me. "Oh. Yeah. I just didn't think about it. I guess I didn't want to confuse people, mixing personal stuff into a work thing. Most of them know me through the office." I nodded again. "But we've been married 8 years. She bit her lip, eyes narrowing slightly. "I know. It's not like I'm ashamed or hiding you." I turned to her. "Then why not say it? Why not just say my husband? It's one word, Sarah." She looked away, fiddling with her ring. "I don't know. It felt like I wanted the focus to be on my work. I've worked so hard to get people to see me as more than just someone's wife." The word stung, though I understood the sentiment. She wasn't trying to hurt me. But still, it felt like I was being edited out of her story. "So you erased me instead?" I asked, quieter than before. She didn't answer. I wasn't even sure she heard. We sat in silence a little longer before she stood up. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to feel like that. Really." I looked at her, not angry, just tired. "It did, though." She nodded once, then turned and went back inside. I followed a few minutes later, re-entering the glow and warmth of the celebration. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. I kept watching her across the room. And she, maybe noticing the distance, kept glancing back, half-smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. People danced. A small group pulled me into a conversation about local politics, and I tried to focus, nodding in the right places, adding a joke when I could. But a part of me was still stuck on that moment from earlier, when she held the mic, when she looked directly at me, and said "good friend." Like the most intimate part of our shared lives had been stripped down, repackaged, and made palatable for a professional crowd. Later that night, as the last guests trickled out and the lights dimmed, Sarah and I stood in the middle of the empty hall. She leaned against me and said, "It went really well, didn't it?" I nodded. It did. But even then, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. The car ride home was quiet. Sarah leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. I kept both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, though my mind was far away. The engine hummed softly between us, the only sound filling the silence that had grown since the party ended. I don't remember what song was playing on the radio, something soft, something forgettable. But I do remember her voice when she finally broke the silence. "You're still upset," she said, not as a question. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what I would even say. That I felt erased? That I'd imagined tonight differently? That I'd smiled and played along, trying to keep the storm from showing in my face? "I'm not angry," I said eventually. I didn't expect that." She sighed, shifting in her seat. "You're making this bigger than it is." "Maybe," I admitted, though I didn't believe that. "But if it were the other way around, if I introduced you as my good friend at some event, would you be okay with it?" She didn't answer. And that, in a way, said more than words. We got home around midnight. I unlocked the door, and the house greeted us with that familiar quiet, the one that only comes after a long evening where everyone has tried too hard. The smell of leftover dinner from earlier still lingered faintly in the kitchen. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off my shoes, waiting for her to say something. But she didn't. She walked past me, heading straight for the bedroom. I stood in the living room for a while, just staring at the dim hallway, wondering when things had started feeling off. Not just tonight. Before that, maybe. In the days where our conversations felt more like checklists. In the mornings where our goodbyes were reduced to a mumbled, "See you tonight." Maybe we had been drifting, and I just didn't notice how far we'd gone until now. I sat on the couch, not ready to sleep, not ready to face the quiet that would hang between us in bed. My phone buzzed. A message from Ryan, a coworker of Sarah's I'd spoken to briefly at the party. "Great meeting you tonight, man. Sarah's lucky to have such a good friend backing her. You two seem close." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the screen, then dropped. I didn't reply. The irony gnawed at me. Not the title, exactly, not just the words "good friend." But the fact that the world would now write its own version of us, and I wasn't in it as her partner. I wasn't even sure what I was in it as anymore. Eventually, I turned off my phone, washed up, and crawled into bed next to her. She was facing away from me, breathing steady, already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering all the little things we used to do, inside jokes, late-night walks, arguing over which movie to watch, holding hands under the table at dinners. And now here we were, side by side, a mile apart. The days after the party blurred together. We didn't talk much about it. Life resumed, like it always does. Mornings came with coffee and rushed conversations about meetings. Evenings were spent with laptops open, silence only broken by the occasional question about dinner or emails. But underneath it all, there was a weight. Something unspoken sitting in the room with us. Every time we looked at each other, I could see it in her eyes too, she felt it. We were both avoiding the conversation we needed to have. It came on a Sunday. We were cleaning the apartment, folding laundry in the living room, when I said, without looking up, "Did you mean what you said that night? About not wanting to mix personal and professional?" She didn't answer right away. She folded a towel, slowly, carefully. Then she said, "Yes. But I also didn't think it would hurt you this much." I sat back, laundry forgotten. It wasn't just about the introduction, Sarah. It was about what it said to everyone else. What it said to me. She looked over at me, her face softer than it had been in days. I didn't think they'd care. They didn't. That's the thing. They accepted it. Like it made sense. She nodded slowly. "And it didn't make sense to you?" "No," I said. "It made me feel like I was just there. Like we're not part of each other's story anymore." She sat down across from me, legs crossed. "That's not true. You are. You've always been. Then why did you leave me out of it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I'm sorry," she said. I was so focused on proving myself that I forgot what it feels like to be part of a team. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. "We're supposed to be a team." She nodded. "I know. And I don't want you to feel like you're just a background character in my life. It wasn't a dramatic fix. There were no tears, no grand romantic declarations. But it was a start. A quiet acknowledgement that we'd gone a little off course, and now we needed to find our way back. That night, we didn't talk about the party anymore. We watched a movie on the couch, our shoulders touching. It felt like the first real closeness we'd shared in a while. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, had that single word, friend, unraveled more than just a night? In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to what most people would call normal. But for me, things weren't normal. They were quieter. Not in the absence of noise kind of way, but in the way thoughts get loud when there's nothing left to distract them. We were being nice to each other, almost too nice. Morning coffee came with extra sweetness. She brought me little things from the store, and I went out of my way to cook her favorite meals. There were no arguments, but that wasn't necessarily a good thing. Sometimes silence is more dangerous than shouting. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under a blanket, me with my laptop open but barely paying attention to the screen. She was scrolling through her phone, and I noticed a picture of the promotion party appear on her feed. Someone had tagged her. A group shot. She was in the middle, laughing. I was there too, on the side, holding a drink, smiling but not really present. The caption read, "Celebrating with the best team ever. So proud of you, Sarah." The comments flowed beneath it. "Congrats. You deserve it. Such a powerhouse. Who's the guy next to you? Is that your brother or something?" That last comment stuck with me. She didn't respond to it. I didn't bring it up. Not right away. I waited. I tried to push past it. But something in that question gnawed at me. It wasn't just that someone didn't know who I was, it was that she didn't tell them. Later that night, as we were brushing our teeth, I asked casually, "Did you see the photo your friend posted from the party?" She nodded through a mouthful of foam. "Yeah. It was a good one." There was a comment on it. Someone asked who I was. She rinsed and wiped her mouth. "Oh. I didn't see that one. You didn't answer it." She looked at me in the mirror. What should I have said? I met her eyes. The truth? She turned toward me then, leaning against the sink. "I wasn't trying to hide anything, James." "I know," I said. "But that doesn't mean it didn't feel like it." There was a pause. Then she said, "It's not just about the party." "You're right. I've been distant. I've been so focused on getting ahead, on being seen as capable, that I forgot being capable doesn't mean being alone." I appreciated the honesty. But it didn't undo what I felt. And what I felt was this: we'd grown into people who talked more to strangers than to each other. People who used to dream about traveling together, buying a cabin near a lake, hosting Sunday dinners. Now we were just maintaining jobs, bills, schedules, and silence. So I did something I hadn't done in a while. I suggested we take a trip. Just us, I said. A weekend away. No emails. No check-ins. Just space. Together. She blinked, surprised. "You want that?" "Yes." "Don't you?" She hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yeah. I do." We booked a cabin in the hills a couple hours outside the city. Nothing fancy: wooden walls, creaky floors, no Wi-Fi. We packed lightly. I left my laptop at home. She brought a book she hadn't touched in months. The first day was awkward, like we were learning each other again. We talked about the weather, the road trip, the quality of the coffee at the nearby diner. But slowly, the space between our words began to shrink. We played cards by the fire. She beat me 3 games in a row and laughed like she hadn't laughed in weeks. We cooked dinner together and danced to a song playing faintly from her phone. It was clumsy and small and perfect. Later that night, we sat outside under the stars, wrapped in blankets. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "when I introduced you that night as my friend, I think part of me was afraid of being seen as vulnerable." I turned to her. "Because being married means you're not strong?" "Not exactly. But some part of me, maybe the part that grew up watching women get overlooked or passed over, thought that if they saw me as someone's wife, they wouldn't take me as seriously." I understood that. I really did. The world wasn't kind to ambitious women. But still, it hurt. "I never wanted to be the reason you were overlooked," I said quietly. She looked at me with something like sadness. And I never wanted to be the reason you felt erased. We sat there, side by side, the night wrapping around us like a gentle warning. We had a lot of work to do. A lot of rebuilding. But for the first time in a while, I felt like we were starting from the same place. That weekend didn't solve everything. When we got back to the city, reality was waiting. But something had shifted. She started introducing me differently, my partner, my husband, James. She made space for me, and I tried not to retreat when I felt like I didn't belong. We weren't perfect. We were messy, stubborn, a little bruised. But we were trying. And in the quiet moments, when she reached for my hand, or when we made each other laugh over something dumb, I believed that maybe we'd find our way back completely. Not as friends, but as the team we promised to be. Some weeks later, I found myself standing in a new room full of people, another work event, but this time it was mine. It was smaller, quieter, less polished than Sarah's promotion party. No champagne fountains or catered hors d'oeuvres. Just co-workers gathered around plastic tables in the break room, some balloons tied to a chair, a cake that someone had picked up from a bakery down the street. A "Congratulations, James" banner hung crookedly behind me. Still, it meant something. It was my turn, in a way. Sarah came with me. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, hair tied back casually. She didn't try to own the room. She didn't have to. She stayed close to me, and when one of my co-workers came over and asked, "And you are?" she smiled and said, "I'm his wife." It was a small moment. Simple. But it settled something deep inside me that I hadn't realized was still shifting. I don't know when relationships stop being shiny. Maybe it happens so slowly that you barely feel it. Routine becomes a rhythm, and then rhythm becomes silence. You go from feeling like two people against the world to just two people trying not to drift apart. It's not dramatic. It's not even tragic. It's just real. But that night at my own celebration, when she reached out and smoothed a wrinkle on my shirt, I realized something: we'd come through it. Not unscathed. Not untouched. But still together. We walked home after the party, hand in hand. "You did great," she said. "Yeah?" I smiled. "Did I introduce you okay?" She laughed. "You did. You even remembered my name." I figured that was important. We passed by a little bakery on the corner that had closed for the night. I looked at her through the window's reflection. Her hair was windblown. Her face was tired. But she looked at me like I mattered, not because I'd achieved something, but because I was part of her life, really part of it. Not as a footnote, not as a prop in the background. As her partner. And I saw her again, not the ambitious colleague or the person trying to prove herself to everyone else. I saw the woman who used to write notes on napkins, who stayed up late helping me with job applications, who knew my favorite songs without ever asking. That night, we didn't talk about the party. We curled up on the couch. We watched a movie. We paused halfway through so she could rant about the ending before it even happened. I teased her. She threw a pillow at me. It felt good. Familiar. True. A few months later, she got another opportunity, a lateral move into a higher profile team. We talked about it over dinner, and she said, "It's not a promotion exactly, but it puts me where I want to be long term." I raised my glass. To being exactly where you want to be. She smiled. And who I want to be there with. The next time we went to an event together, she introduced me again. "This is James," she said. "My husband." It wasn't for show. It wasn't performative. It was just her, speaking truth into a space that once blurred us. I won't say things were perfect after that. We still argued sometimes about groceries, about time, about each other's priorities. But every time we hit a rough patch, we came back to that conversation on the patio, the cold air, and that moment where I said, "It's one word, Sarah." And she knew what I meant. Because sometimes, the smallest word can say the most. And sometimes, saying the right word can mean everything. Looking back, I don't think that night was the beginning of the end. I think it was the end of the beginning, the moment we stopped pretending everything was fine and started actually doing the work. Together. Not as friends. As something stronger. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.